Harrison Ruffin Tyler was born when Calvin Coolidge was president, but he was the grandson of John Tyler, who took office in 1841. That strange twist of family timing made Harrison a living bridge across centuries. While his grandfather shaped the nation, Harrison shaped his own corner of history, saving historic sites, building businesses, and reminding the world that the past was closer than anyone imagined. So, what happened to him? Let's find out. Harrison Ruffin Tyler was an American chemical engineer, businessman, and historic preservationist. He is perhaps best remembered as the grandson of John Tyler, the 10th President of the United States. A living link that stretched back to 1790, the year of President Tyler's birth, and forward to Harrison's passing in 2025. Incredibly, his life bridged 235 years of American history across just 3 generations. But Harrison Tyler's significance went far beyond this extraordinary lineage. Trained as a chemical engineer, he built a successful career in business while devoting much of his energy to preserving history. His deepest passion was Berkeley Plantation, the ancestral Tyler estate on the James River in Virginia, which he worked tirelessly to restore and protect. Through his stewardship, the property became both a preserved historic site and a living reminder of his family's role in America's story. In this way, Harrison Tyler's life reflected both continuity and contribution. A man who carried the echoes of the early republic, yet who also shaped his own legacy through science, business, and preservation. Early life and family heritage. Harrison Ruffin Tyler was born on November 9, 1928 in Richmond, Virginia, into a family woven deeply into the fabric of American history. On his father's side, he was the grandson of President John Tyler and First Lady Julia Gardner Tyler, making him a living link to the antebellum presidency. His mother, Sue Ruffin Tyler, descended from the prominent Harrison family of Virginia and was the great-granddaughter of Edmund Ruffin, the agricultural reformer and ardent secessionist. His ancestry placed him squarely at the crossroads of America's triumphs and its darkest conflicts. But noble lineage did not mean comfort. Harrison's father, Lyon Gardner Tyler, had been president of the College of William and Mary for more than 3 decades, yet by the time Harrison was born, the family's finances were strained. Lyon was 75 when his youngest son arrived and passed away in 1935, when Harrison was just 6. The Great Depression compounded the family's hardship. Harrison grew up in rural Virginia along the James River, learning thrift and resilience early. He later recalled chopping wood at dawn for heat, wearing clothes stitched from burlap sacks, and rationing electricity to listen to the radio only once a week. Through these lean years, his mother became the family's anchor. Sue Tyler, a former teacher, guarded the Tyler family papers and letters, passing on to her children not only an education, but also a reverence for their heritage. Harrison and his older brother, Lyon Jr., were schooled at home before attending public school in Charles City County and later St. Christopher's School in Richmond. Despite their modest life, moments of history broke through. At just 8 years old, Harrison visited the White House and met President Franklin D. Roosevelt, an extraordinary reminder that he carried the name of a president even as he lived the ordinary life of a Depression-era boy. When it came time for college, money was scarce. Then, in a twist that became family lore, help arrived in the form of Nancy Astor, the Viscountess Astor. A Virginia-born philanthropist and friend of the Tyler family, she donated $5,000 to cover his tuition, handing over the check through her car window before driving away. The gift, said to have been encouraged by President Roosevelt himself, allowed Harrison to attend William and Mary, his grandfather's alma mater. He studied chemistry, graduating in 1949. Finding few opportunities in chemistry alone, he pursued further study at Virginia Polytechnic Institute, where he earned a degree in chemical engineering in 1951. That training launched him into a career in industry rather than politics or law, a conscious step out of the long shadow of his family's political legacy. Armed with science and engineering skills, Harrison Ruffin Tyler was ready to make his own mark in the modern world. Education and early influences. Harrison Tyler's path to higher education was shaped by an act of generosity that became part of family legend. With little money to spare for tuition, the Tylers received unexpected help from Nancy Astor, Viscountess Astor, a Virginia-born philanthropist and friend of the family. At William and Mary, Harrison studied chemistry and earned his bachelor's degree in 1949. But the job market for chemists was tight, and practical advice from a professor steered him toward engineering. He went on to Virginia Polytechnic Institute, now Virginia Tech, where he completed a degree in chemical engineering in 1951. That combination, chemistry and engineering, would shape the rest of his professional life. It gave him both scientific grounding and technical versatility, opening doors in industry that might otherwise have remained closed. More importantly, it allowed Harrison Tyler to step out from the long shadow of his political lineage and build a career that was distinctly his own. While his name tied him to the nation's past, his education positioned him squarely in the modern industrial economy of mid-20th century America. Career. Harrison Tyler didn't follow the family's political path. Instead, in the early 1950s, he went into chemistry, a field about as far from Washington as one could get. His first big break came at the Virginia Carolina Chemical Corporation, where he worked as a project manager at a plant in Charleston, South Carolina. There he learned the gritty side of industrial chemistry, figuring out how to treat hard water so factories could run their systems smoothly. Later stints, including one in Cincinnati, sharpened his technical edge, and he even secured a patent for a water treatment process that gave aluminum a brighter shine. By the mid-1960s, however, corporate America began to shift around him. When Mobil bought out Virginia Carolina in 1963, Harrison suddenly found himself swallowed into a giant oil company culture that didn't suit him. Rather than stay and conform, he chose to step away. It was a bold move, but it set him on the course that would define his professional life. In 1968, teaming up with colleague William P. Simmons, Harrison co-founded ChemTreat Inc., a small water treatment company in Glen Allen, Virginia. Their mission was simple but timely: help industries manage their water systems, keep boilers from corroding, treat cooling water, and ensure smooth operations. Environmental awareness was rising, factories were growing, and clean water was in demand. ChemTreat arrived at just the right moment. Under Harrison's leadership, the little startup grew into a powerhouse. Paper mills, hospitals, and big manufacturers, including names like Philip Morris and Kraft, relied on ChemTreat's solutions. Harrison was not the type to sit in an ivory tower. He liked solving problems on the ground, applying chemistry directly to leaky pipes, clogged systems, and corroding towers. It gave the company a reputation for practical know-how, not just technical jargon. What made Harrison stand out as a business leader was his attitude toward the people who worked for him. In 1989, long before it was trendy, he began transferring company ownership shares to employees. By 2000, when Harrison retired from daily management, the employees collectively owned a controlling stake. He believed they deserved to benefit directly from the success they had built together. That foundation helped ChemTreat keep thriving. By the mid-2000s, it was bringing in more than $200 million in revenue. In 2007, the company was acquired by the Danaher Corporation for $435 million, a stunning number for a business that had begun almost 40 years earlier as a risky idea between two engineers. For Harrison, the accomplishment wasn't just about money. It was about building something that lasted, something rooted in science, problem-solving, and fairness to the people who worked beside him. While history remembered him as John Tyler's grandson, Harrison Ruffin Tyler had carved out his own legacy in the world of industry, quietly, steadily, and with real impact, personal life and family. While Harrison Tyler was busy shaping his career, he was also shaping a family. In July 1957, at 28, he married Frances Payne Bouknight, Payne, as everyone called her, in Johnston, South Carolina. Payne came from an old Southern family herself and had studied interior design at the postgraduate level. She had grown up in a historic plantation home, so she shared Harrison's appreciation for history and old houses. Together, they made their home in Richmond, Virginia, where they raised 3 children: Julia Gardner Tyler, born 1958, Harrison Ruffin Tyler, Jr., born 1960, and William Bouknight Tyler, born 1961. Despite his demanding career, Harrison was a devoted father. He wanted his children to grow up grounded, but also aware of the remarkable heritage tied to their name. Family time was often spent at Lion's Den, a rustic riverfront lodge Harrison had inherited. It was a place for fishing, hunting, and long talks by the water, a reminder that while their family carried a presidential legacy, their daily life was rooted in simple pleasures. Payne was more than a partner. She was Harrison's collaborator in what would become one of the most meaningful projects of their lives. In 1975, the couple purchased Sherwood Forest Plantation in Charles City County, the former home of President John Tyler. The house had been in the family since 1842, but by the 1970s it was in poor shape. Parts of it still bore scars from the Civil War. Trees had grown through ruined wings, and the gardens were long overrun. Many might have walked away from the daunting task, but not the Tylers. For Payne, restoring Sherwood was a dream. She was dying to restore an old house, Harrison later recalled with a smile. She threw herself into the project, researching 19th-century furnishings, overseeing repairs, and carefully bringing the interiors back to life. Harrison supported her wholeheartedly, balancing his work at ChemTreat with weekends spent clearing land, fixing structures, or, in his later years, happily climbing onto his backhoe to help with the grounds. Together, they turned Sherwood Forest back into a living historical site rather than a fading relic. Friends remembered them as warm and unpretentious. Harrison, despite his lineage, rarely brought up his presidential grandfather unless asked. He preferred to talk about history in general, his family, or the outdoors. Visitors to Sherwood recall him as a genial host who loved walking guests through the plantation's long hallways, telling stories of the past, or simply sitting on the porch with a book in hand. Harrison and Payne's marriage lasted 62 years, a true partnership built on shared love of family, history, and preservation. When Payne passed away in 2019, it was a deep blow. Harrison's own health declined in the years that followed, but their legacy together, 3 children, decades of family life in Richmond, and the careful restoration of Sherwood Forest, stood as a testament to their bond. Sherwood Forest Plantation and beyond. Harrison Ruffin. Tyler's name is forever tied to Sherwood Forest Plantation, the family's ancestral home, because of the decades he and Payne devoted to saving and restoring it. Sherwood Forest, a graceful white-frame mansion along the James River, had been President John Tyler's residence after leaving the White House and remained in family hands for generations. By the time Harrison purchased it in 1975, however, the house had fallen into disrepair. Its history was undeniable, but it needed care, vision, and commitment. Harrison and Payne took on the task with both reverence and determination. Guided by some 47,000 Tyler family letters and documents that Harrison's mother had carefully preserved, they used original descriptions of furnishings, decor, and landscaping as a kind of blueprint for restoration. Payne's training in interior design proved invaluable. She tracked down period antiques, bought back original Tyler pieces from cousins and auctions, and even had wallpaper reproduced to match the 19th-century patterns Julia Gardner Tyler once chose. Together, they returned the mansion to the appearance it had during President Tyler's lifetime. The work extended beyond the house itself. Overgrown gardens were cleared and replanted to follow their historic designs. The ballroom wing, The elegant addition John Tyler had built so he could dance the Virginia reel, once again became a highlight of the estate. Even quirky relics emerged, like the rediscovery of the six-seater wooden privy hidden on the grounds. What had been fading into obscurity was revived as a vibrant, living historic home. By the 1990s, Sherwood Forest was operating as both a family residence and a heritage site. Visitors could book guided tours of the house, while the extensive grounds were open for daily self-guided walks. The Tylers welcomed the curious with grace, sharing not only the artifacts and architecture, but also the stories that animated the plantation. From presidential history to the local legend of the Gray Lady, a ghost said to rock in her chair upstairs. Harrison, ever genial, enjoyed the mix of history and folklore, seeing it all as part of Sherwood's charm. For Harrison, the restoration was never just about bricks and paint. It was about honoring his grandfather's memory, safeguarding a piece of American history, and ensuring that Sherwood Forest would continue to educate and inspire long after he was gone. Beyond Sherwood Forest, Harrison Tyler's love for history carried him into other preservation projects. In 1996, he purchased Fort Pocahontas, an earthen fortification along the James River not far from his home. The fort had played a remarkable but largely forgotten role in the Civil War. In May 1864, it was built and defended by United States colored troops, black Union soldiers, who successfully held off Confederate attackers at the Battle of Wilson's Wharf. For more than a century, the site had sat untouched and overgrown, its story fading from memory. Harrison saw its importance immediately. He financed efforts to stabilize and clear the old earthworks, determined that the history of the men who fought there would not be lost. Beginning in 1997, he hosted annual Civil War reenactments at the site, bringing the story of Wilson's Wharf to life each spring. For him, it wasn't just about muskets and uniforms. It was about honoring the courage of black soldiers whose sacrifices had too often been overlooked. He also worked with archaeologists from the College of William and Mary to study the fort, blending preservation with education. In Harrison's hands, Fort Pocahontas became not just a ruin, but a classroom, living proof of how much history still waits to be remembered. His commitment to history extended beyond battlefields and plantations. In 2001, Harrison made one of his most lasting contributions, a $5 million gift and the donation of 22,000 books and historic documents from the Tyler family archives to the College of William and Mary, his father's alma mater. The collection included generations' worth of letters, papers, and memorabilia, a treasure trove for scholars. For Harrison, it was more than philanthropy. It was an act of stewardship, ensuring that the Tyler story, and by extension a piece of America's story, would be preserved for future generations. The college recognized his devotion in a deeply symbolic way. In 2021, it renamed its history department the Harrison Ruffin Tyler Department of History. On campus, the Tyler Family Garden now features bronze busts of President John Tyler, Lion Gardner Tyler, and Harrison himself, 3 generations, cast in bronze, reminding students that history is not just a subject to study, but a living chain of people and choices. Through Sherwood Forest, Fort Pocahontas, and William and Mary, Harrison Tyler's preservation work stretched across centuries of American history, from the Revolution to the Civil War to the modern era. His efforts told a broad story, one that connected his family's past to the nation's larger narrative, and one that he took quiet pride in carrying forward. Throughout his years at Sherwood Forest, Harrison Tyler became more than just a caretaker of an old house. He was its storyteller. He spoke with ease about his ancestors, weaving tales of his grandfather's presidency in the 1840s or his father's decades spent rebuilding the College of William and Mary after the Civil War. Visitors often remarked that stepping into Sherwood was like stepping into history itself, because Harrison was there to bring it alive with anecdotes, reflections, and a touch of humor about the long arc of American life. But Harrison's approach to history was not simply nostalgic. He resisted painting the past in soft colors. He openly acknowledged that Sherwood had been a plantation sustained by enslaved labor, and that this reality was part of its story. In his later years, he supported efforts led by one of his granddaughters to research and document the names and lives of those who had been enslaved on the property. For Harrison, this honesty was essential. Preservation was not about polishing the past, but about remembering it in full. He believed that places like Sherwood Forest and Fort Pocahontas mattered because they allowed future generations to feel connected to the nation's heritage, with all its triumphs and its flaws. In his telling, the past was not just his family's, but America's. And in that role, Harrison saw himself not as an owner, but as a steward, someone charged with carrying the memory forward until it could be passed on again. Legacy and significance. By the time Harrison Ruffin Tyler reached his 90s, he had become a historical figure in his own right. The idea that a grandson of an 1840s president was still alive in the 2020s fascinated the public, and Harrison met that curiosity with quiet grace. He often reflected on the extraordinary span of his family's story. My grandfather was born in 1790. My father was born in 1853. And I was born in 1928, he marveled, summing up centuries in a single line. It was almost impossible to fathom, a living link stretching from the days of George Washington to the digital age. Yet Harrison was never content to be known only for his ancestry. His own life carried weight. As a chemical engineer and entrepreneur, he built ChemTreat into a thriving business, creating jobs and innovating in industrial water treatment. As a preservationist, he and his wife Payne poured heart and resources into Sherwood Forest and Fort Pocahontas, rescuing pieces of American history that might otherwise have been lost. And as a benefactor, he enriched the archives of William and Mary with a gift that ensured the Tyler legacy and the nation's would endure in scholarship as well as in memory. Harrison died on May 25, 2025, at the age of 96, at his home in Richmond. His final years were marked by illness and dementia, and he had already endured the loss of Payne, his beloved wife of more than 6 decades, in 2019. With his passing, the last living grandchild of President John Tyler was gone. The generational bridge that stretched across 235 years of American history finally closed. But Harrison left behind more than a remarkable lineage. Through the trust and foundation he and Payne established, Sherwood Forest remains in family hands, cared for by his son William and daughter-in-law, open to the public as a place of history and remembrance. His 3 children and grandchildren continue the stewardship he cherished, carrying forward not only the Tyler story, but also his belief that history is something to be protected, lived with, and passed on. Harrison Ruffin. Tyler's life was extraordinary in its span, but also in its substance. He was not just the grandson of a president. He was an innovator, a preserver, a family man. In the end, his legacy is measured not only in the centuries he bridged, but in the history he saved, the values he lived, and the family he left to carry those things forward. In the end, Harrison Ruffin Tyler's life formed a rare and remarkable bridge between centuries. One thread tied him directly to the early republic through a grandfather who had known the White House in the 1840s. The other was firmly rooted in the 20th century, where Harrison made his own mark as an engineer, entrepreneur, and preservationist. He will be remembered as the genteel Virginian who could speak both of John Tyler's legacy and of the chemistry behind industrial water treatment, embodying the blend of history and progress that defined his life. What made Harrison exceptional was not only the lineage he carried, but the way he chose to honor it. He protected and restored Sherwood Forest Plantation, ensuring that a vital piece of America's story would be preserved for future generations. He was a steward of memory, but also a builder in his own right, grounded, industrious, and quietly visionary. His story is intimate in its devotion to family and heritage, yet far-reaching in its impact on education and historical preservation. Harrison Ruffin. Tyler showed how a single life can connect past and present in extraordinary ways, leaving behind not just the weight of ancestry, but a living legacy of service and remembrance. And that's what happened to President John Tyler's last grandsons. Through an extraordinary stretch of history, they carried their family's legacy from the 1800s into the 21st century. Their lives were quieter than their grandfathers, but no less remarkable. Reminders that history isn't always as far away as it seems. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, and join me next time as we uncover more hidden chapters from America's past. Until next time.